Good morning, all. Welcome to Get Ready for CMMC with Terry Homburg with Washington PTAC and the KETA Subcenter. And with that, I will have Terry take it away. Thanks, Terry.
Good morning. Thank you. Well, I see on our list of attendees, everybody is from the state of Washington, and I only recognize one company of everybody, so a bunch of new people. We'll go through, let's see, my background. I retired in 2018 from the Department of Defense as a contracting officer after 29 years, predominantly in services contracts, architect engineering, and construction contracts, and a vast experience with the government-wide purchase card program. The day after I retired, I joined PTAC and now sharing all kinds of information that I couldn't tell contractors on the other side of the table. So glad to be with you and be able to help you through the great bureaucracy of federal contracting. This is my full-blown class on the DoD initiative for cybersecurity. I've conducted this class in various versions and small time frames and whatnot, but this is my full-blown one, so you'll get everything. So the class will include cybersecurity, Department of Defense interim rule that went into effect December 1st last year, as well as CMMC, which we now call 1.0. And we'll talk briefly about the proposed changes, which are calling CMMC 2.0. Main emphasis today will be on CMMC levels 1 through 3 and the DoD interim rule, and a short discussion about the proposed changes on CMMC 2.0. What I would like you to do is jot down your questions on the PowerPoint presentation, which you should have all gotten. And we'll go through your questions at the end, because I think a lot of your questions will probably be answered throughout this presentation. I have two questions that you should have received. One is, have you attended a CMMC or DoD interim rule class before today? How are we getting these answers?
You could just ask them to. All right, so Diane says she has not. Susie says yes. So they're just posting in chat.
Okay.
Greg says no. So Gordon says no, but he's familiar with it. Let's see, who am I missing? Miguel? And apologies in advance, SOFAC. Those are the two we haven't heard from.
Okay, so we have a mix. People that, Miguel, no. Okay, so we have a mix. Some have heard of it, some are familiar with it, and some know nothing about it. Good. Okay, so I know where I'm at with you attendees. Second question, put your answer in the chat. Have you been or are you now a federal government prime contractor or subcontractor?
Okay, Diane, no. Susie, yes. Greg, yes. Gordon, no, but they support with compliance. Miguel says not currently, but in the past. SOFAC says yes. So primarily, yes.
Yes, good. So I can approach things a little differently. A lot of you have experience with federal contracts. So you're going to see some of these clauses or be aware of them in our contracts. So 3 points of trivia before we get into the PowerPoint. On 60 Minutes, on January 31st, the head of the U.S. counterintelligence stated with 100% confidence that all U.S. citizens' personal information and data has already been hacked. Number two, there are two kinds of companies in the world. Those that have been hacked and those that are being hacked currently and don't know it. It's pretty scary. Number three, North Korea has more than 6,000 full-time Army personnel that are full-time hackers. All right, with those scary thoughts, let's get into our presentation. Chat. Okay, getting ready for CMMC, which is Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Did not advance. All right. My slides are not advancing.
Oh, always the technology. Sometimes it's really hard to see the little arrows in the bottom. Or did you try using the buttons on your laptop, the arrow button?
Using the arrow buttons on my keyboard. They worked before we started the class. Let's see. Stop video, chat, pause.
Okay. You want me to pull it? Oh, there you go.
Okay, see if I can change my view. We're in business. Okay.
Ooh.
All right, our agenda for today is I'm going to give you some background of why we are, why the federal government is going to have CMMC, the Department of Defense CMMC initiative. We'll talk briefly about the proposed changes that were just came out this past week. I spent a lot of time last night updating the slide to provide that information to you, just so you're aware of it. It's not in effect, but we'll talk about that. CMMC impact on you, the requirements of CMMC, the assessment process, how to get certified. And then we'll talk briefly at the end about the DoD Cybersecurity Interim Rule, which is in effect now. We'll have question and answers and a summary after that. That's right. All right, abbreviations and acronyms. What I would like you to do is to take this slide and set it aside because you'll probably be referring back to this regularly throughout this presentation. So there's some abbreviations. The ones that are in a kind of an orange color are new abbreviations and acronyms since CMMC has been launched. New terms in our vocabulary in contracting. So CA is Certified Assessor, CMMC, which we already talked, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. -AB is the accreditation body. CUI is Controlled Unclassified Information. That's one we'll be using quite a bit. We need to understand what it is. C3PAO are the Certified Third-Party Assessor Organizations. Those are the ones that you will enter into a contract with to get an audit of your cybersecurity system in order to get a certification that's good for 3 years. And at the bottom, OSC, that's you, the organization seeking certification, and SPURS, the Supplier Performance Risk System, which is related to the DoD Interim Rule, where you do a self-assessment and post your score up on the internet on SPURS. Background. Reason why we're doing CMMC, or why DoD is launching this, is because $600 billion in trade secrets are lost each year from our over 300,000 DoD contractors and subcontractors. That's $600 billion per year. That's a lot of loss. 80% of these entities, 1.1 million, are from foreign students, of which 34% are from China. So Every day, their adversaries are getting more sophisticated. It compromises our troops and war fighters' capabilities. DoD is also changing the requirement that you have to get certified in order to get award. In the past, and what's in the clause in past federal agency contracts is the requirement for you to do a self-assessment and provide that score to the federal agency's contracting officer. Well, that wasn't being done, but it's not all the fault of the contractors, because the federal agency's contracting officers weren't following up either. So fault on both sides. New requirement for CMMC: in order to get a contract now, you have to have your certification. So that's how they're fixing that problem. A little interesting tidbit I learned about a year ago, 2 years ago, that it only takes $2,000 to purchase the software to crack passwords. That was pretty scary. Only $2,000. DoD wants to avoid risks from cyber attacks. Universities are centers of innovation, and they get hacked all the time. Katie Arrington, who used to be the DoD Chief Information Security Officer, was the head of the DoD program. They're in flux now. They're searching for a new party. Also, the responsibility of the CMMC program is shifting to the Department of Defense IT department. So it's going through a lot of changes right now. The last bullet there is interesting. On average, it took 205 days to identify that an IT system was compromised. And it wasn't until only the FBI came knocking at your door to tell you that you've been hacked. The companies weren't even aware of it. The FBI came and told you that it was being hacked. That was 69% of the time. And what they also found out from those attacks, that only 89% were in cyber compliance, or 89% were not cyber compliant. This is what the DoD is trying to fix. Examples. So in March of 2020, there were a number of large DoD contractors that were victims of compromised data access through a subcontractor in Colorado. So a little more information on that. Each one of those companies, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing, Tesla, they all had a subcontractor, same subcontractor in Colorado, that got hacked by a foreign agent, who was then able to go up to the prime contractor's data and steal information. So don't think that the issue was the federal agencies or the big prime contractors. The hackers get in through the back door, through any tier down below in the subcontractors, and go up to the prime contractors and the federal agencies. Another incident in June of 2020, Chinese military officer was caught leaving the US. With research materials from the University of California, San Francisco, after lying on an application to obtain a visitor's visa for a work-study program. They're trying every way they can to steal the research from the United States. So what's been happening in the past predominantly is the United States spends lots of money and many years in research and development to come up with new weapons or technology or whatnot. And the foreign entities like North Korea, Russia, Iran, China hack into federal agencies, prime contractors, subcontractors, and steal that research and development. So an example, China years ago stole the blueprints for making aircraft carriers. Now, when you look at their aircraft carriers, they look very much like ours. They stole the information, they built it themselves for less money. We'll be talking about an aircraft fighter here on the next slide. Most recently, December of 2020, Russia hacked into the departments of Treasury, Commerce, and Fortune 500 companies. You should have probably heard it on the news. It was called SolarWinds. This software was being used by these agencies and companies that was loaded in March and April of 2020. 18,000 entities in the US used SolarWinds software. The hack was discovered by a private individual IT company called FireEye, and they brought it to the attention of the federal government. And they're still assessing the losses and the damage that hack has occurred. Next slide. All right, here's that US fighter jet that I was talking about. It's the F-35 jet fighter versus the Chinese J-31. Looking at those two pictures, they're very similar. So the difference is the one on the right is the US F-35 jet fighter. It's the latest jet fighter the US government has. The one on the left is the Japanese copy. They stole the blueprints. They made it themselves for $31 million less the copy. And the only difference between the two is the fighter jet on the right, the US F-35, you can see there's one jet engine. The one on the left, there's two sticking out the back there. And the only other is the spire on the left, on spire on the nose of the plane is on the Chinese plane, and the one on the right, the US doesn't have a spire on it. Fortunately, the Chinese are having problems with their jet engines. Next slide. So, Department of Defense response is restrict and control, secure the over 300,000 Department of Defense and non-Department of Defense supplier information systems and networks, codify it, meaning turning it into law, cybersecurity practices, processes, and assessments, and enforcement, the supply chain accountability to protect our intellectual property. Thus, the introduction of Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification in 2020. So the DoD CMMC initiative, and this was the first one that came out, 1.0. It started in January 30th of 2020. The accreditation body was established in June of that year. It's a 5-year rollout. We're in the first year of 5 years right now. It established 5 levels, 1 through 5, 1 through 3 being the most common. 1 is everyday cybersecurity hygiene. Your computer at home, your computer in your office, you should all be able to pass level 1 cybersecurity hygiene. That's just having a firewall, malware, having passwords to protect your files. It's basic computer hygiene. So most every company should be able to pass level 1 and get a certification for that. It does require a third-party certification before contract award. Certification process has already started. There are auditors available. There are 3 C3PAOs available currently as of September. In August of 2020, Congress required the Department of Defense to be certified at level 3. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And interesting, there was supposed to be a report back to Congress by DoD on their progress. I haven't heard the results of that. Don't even know if it took place. And the DoD interim rule went into effect December 1st of 2020, so 11 months ago. So those are the DoD initiatives. So the next 2 slides, we're going to talk about the current status. This is the 1.0, what's in effect right now. Certification is required in order to be awarded a contract, and that includes as a subcontractor, with exceptions, and we'll be talking about those. No solicitations will be issued until after the 5-year rollout. So that would be 1 October of 2025. As I mentioned, we're in the first year of the 5-year rollout. Department of Defense wants to issue some solicitations as under a pilot program. They've identified a number of the Department of Defense agencies that will provide some solicitations for the pilot program. That's from the Army, the Air Force, Navy, Defense Logistics Agency, and the Defense Health Services. But it's been delayed till next year. It was supposed to have been this year in 2021. But there are problems, so it's been delayed to FY22. As I mentioned, the requirements for CMMC will not appear in any solicitations other than those pilot solicitations until 1 October 2025. That's 5 years to work out the bugs. There's still many unknowns in how the certifications and assessments will be handled. All practices and requirements are laid out for the contractors to start implementation in NIST SP 800-171. We'll talk about NIST here shortly. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 CPAOs that are authorized to conduct audits as of September 27th. There are some, if I remember right, some 400 that are pending right now, going through the process of being certified as C3PAOs. So right now there's a shortage. And we'll talk about that here shortly too. All right. So late breaking news. This is what I stayed up late last night updating this presentation. Just a couple of days ago, the Department of Defense, as a result of reviewing 850 review comments from the public on CMMC 1.0, have proposed some changes. These are the proposed changes at a high level. It was just released a few days ago. The changes these changes go through a long process before they become effective. They have to go through public comment, through a rulemaking process, and then they got to get codified. And that takes 9 to 24 months. So we're talking up to 2 years before these changes potentially may take place. Some of these could be manipulated and changed. Some could be deleted and others could be added. So we don't know. But I just want to give you a heads up that the DoD is talking about making some changes. Everything else in this presentation is about CMMC 1.0, what it is right now. These are potential changes. Just want to let you be aware that this is in the works, but it could take 9 to 24 months before any of this might become effective. So the third bullet, what of note there is once it's codified, the requirements will go in solicitations. So that 5-year rule is out. It's not going to wait till 1 October of 2025. Soon as this is saying these proposed changes that once it's codified, they'll start putting it in solicitations. Also, they said that DoD will publish comprehensive cost analysis for each level of CMMC 2.0. So this has been a recurring question month after month for more than a year now. Small businesses especially asking, what is it going to cost me to get certified at level 1 or level 3 or whatever? DoD last year came out and published that it cost about $1,000 for level 1 and about $51,000 for level 3. With 2.0, they're saying they're going to actually do an analysis and publish it, making available to all businesses what the approximate cost is going to be for each CMMC level 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So that's a welcome change. Also, in the proposed changes, they're saying that the pilot solicitations will be suspended. They're not going to issue them. Also, the next bullet, CMMC levels will change from currently 5 levels to 3 levels. And lastly, this is the big one, CMMC level 1 will be a self-assessment, not a third party where you got to go and hire an auditor and have them come in and do an assessment to get your certification. The proposed change, and this is a big one, is that level 1 will be a self-assessment, like the current DoD interim rule, which is a self-assessment, posting it up on the internet in spurs. So that's a biggie. So 2 biggies there right at the end. Instead of 5 levels, there'll be 3 levels, and level 1, which is 70 to 80% of all DoD contractors, prime or subs, will be at level 1. It's going to be a self-assessment, so that greatly reduces your cost. Cybersecurity compliance drivers. So any federal agency would issue a solicitation and put in the FAR clause. This first one here is the Federal Contract Information, FCI. FAR clause 52.204-21 that was updated and issued in June of 2016. That FAR clause is the equivalent of CMMC level 1. I've provided the website for you. You can read further. The next one is the Department of Defense clause, which is covered defense information, and DFARS 252.204-712 that was released in December of 2019. So the requirements in that clause is to provide adequate security utilizing the NIST SP 800-171, which is in revision 2 now. And the clause requires that if you have an incident, you need to report it. So that's cyber incident response and reporting. That is a requirement of that clause. And I provided the website for you to read more about that clause. So I'll be mentioning this again at the end, but it's really important in your, especially those people who have experience with federal contracts, that you want to see whether your solicitation and follow-on contract has that FAR clause, federal contract information in it. It's not a mandatory clause to be put in every federal contract. Contracting officer has to determine whether it's required to be in the solicitation and the follow-on contract or not. The second one is the Department of Defense. So if you had a solicitation that was issued by any agency within the Department of Defense and its follow-on contract, they may have the covered defense information DFARS clause in it. So part of your review of a solicitation is make sure that you understand which cybersecurity clauses may or may not be in your solicitation, so you can make an informed decision on how you want to proceed with that solicitation. Okay, so on the previous page, we reviewed FAR clause 52.204-21. That's basic safeguards on covered contractor information system. That's the title for that clause. Within that clause, there are 15 subparagraphs comprising of the 17 basic requirements of all government contractors to protect contract information. The 17 safeguards are all included in the NIST instruction, and they constitute all of the CMMC level 1 practices. So we've got the FAR clause. It's got the 15 subparagraphs in there that address the 17 basic requirements, and those are the equivalent to getting certified at CMMC level 1. NIST SP 800-171 revision 2 was published in February of 2020. The NIST stands for National Institute of Standards and Technology. The SP is special publication in which this 800-171 governs controlled unclassified information, CUI. This is something that you'll hear over and over again is CUI. So NIST only addresses those solicitations or requirements by contractors that handle or create CUI. And the last bullet there is that is the equivalent of CMMC level 1 requirements. And I've provided the website there for you to get to the NIST, and you can read more about it there. So there's a difference between the NIST and CMMC. NIST 800-171 is the current requirement. DoD contractors, it's required for any DoD contractor that processes or stores CUI. So CUI can happen for the requirement for you to have the certification at the FAR level, Federal Acquisition Regulations, federal agency solicitations, is if the solicitation requires you to create CUI or you have CUI stored on your computer. In either case, then you need to comply with the clause. There's 110 controls, 320 assessment objectives, requires you to create a plan of action and milestones, which we call a POAM, perform a self-assessment and submit your score to the DoD. And DCMA is the Defense Contract Management Agency, who conducts the audits with the DoD assessment methodology. So that is different than CMMC. So the way they, Department of Defense has developed CMMC is that there's going to be 5 levels of cybersecurity maturity, 17 practices, also known as controls, practices and controls, synonymous, 173 practices. And for example, level 3, you have to meet 130 practices. All the practices need to be implemented. So for example, you're going for level 3 certification. There's 130 practices. If an auditor comes in and you pass 129 of them, you don't get your certificate. You have to pass all of them. It's all or none. So in addition to the additional practices for level 3, you have to meet all the practices for level 1. So say you pass all the additional practices for level 3, but you miss 2 on level 1, you don't get your certification. Or just the opposite, you meet all the practices or controls on level 1, but you miss a couple on level 3. Well, you've qualified and get it. You can get a certification for level 1, but you won't get your certification for level 3 because you missed 2 of them. That means if you really want that level 3, then you've got to fix those problems. And if you're beyond, I think it's 90 days, then you got to enter into another contract and start that process over again, to have an auditor come out, pay for them, and see if you can pass the audit and get your certification. Next to last bullet there, all contractors will need a certification in order to get awarded a prime contract or a subcontract. And lastly, there is no self-assessment under CMMC 1.0. Where under NIST, you can see there, the fifth bullet down was you do a self-assessment and report your score to the Department of Defense contracting officer. Under CMMC, there's no self-assessment. Every level requires an audit by a third party to get a certification that's good for 3 years. Current issues. So I've identified 3 recurring questions. The first one, can an IT company provide a service to a contractor and also audit them? So in 2020, the Department of Defense decided that a company may do both, only if the 2 services are provided by separate divisions within the company. So a person in Division 1 can assist the company to get a certification, but that person can't be on the audit team, go out and audit. So it's like the fox guarding the hen house. Same person within the same entity can't do both. But if the auditing company is set up, we got two separate divisions, they can separate the two. Department of Defense says that they can do both. Does this apply to all DoD subcontractors? The short answer is yes. It applies not only to prime contractors, but to subcontractors at every tier. Third question, will subcontractors require certification? Yes. And the last question, can a company correct a deficiency during an assessment process to pass and get the certification? That question has not been answered yet. I have not heard that. So the question at hand is, you believe you're ready for to get an audit and get certified at, say, level 1 or level 3. You enter into a contract with a C3 PAO. It gets scheduled some months later. They communicate with you. We're ready to do your audit. They ask for information. They review it before they come. Then they come, and then they start reviewing your IT system and your physical security. I don't know if you just caught that, but there's two components to cybersecurity. One is your IT system, and the other is physical security. Locking your doors, locking your filing cabinets, locking your windows, so on and so forth, in order to get a certification. So the question is say you're going through to get level 1 certification, there's 110 controls, and the auditor determines there's 2 of them that you don't fully meet, so you're not going to get certified. That auditor is on site for, say, 2-3 days. They caught the discrepancy on the first day. Maybe it was simple enough that you could fix it within the next day or 2 while the auditor is still there. If you fix it before the auditor leaves, is that acceptable? That's the question. Or you're just deficient. You get a report from the auditor that you're missing 2 of the 110 controls, and they leave, and you got to start over and hire them again to have them come back. So that's the question. If it's possible, some of them can be fixed during the audit because they're not that significant, can be fixed quickly. Others can take weeks, if not months, to get corrected. So those that could possibly get fixed, will it be acceptable to get those fixed while the auditor's there to pass the audit? That's the question. Don't have the answer for that one yet. Impact on you. You have to pay to play with the Department of Defense. So as I mentioned earlier, the approximate cost for level 1, DoD mentioned about a year ago, is about $1,000. For level 3, it's about $51,000. And that's over the life of the 3-year certification. Of course, the preponderance of that expense is going to be in that first year. You, the OSC, the company that wants to get the audit and get the certification, you got to work with your internal team or hire somebody to help you get ready for an audit. Then you got to enter into a contract with an auditor, a C3 PAO, and pay them. And typically that's going to be their travel time and the number of hours that they're on site, that cost. So most of that $1,000 or the $51,000 is going to be towards the front end. But during the 3-year period, you may have to get reassessed to make sure that you're current and get ready for the follow-on certification. Second bullet requires third-party audit and certification prior to award. The CAs will most likely charge by the hour plus their travel time. So the longer they're on your site, the more it's going to cost, and the further away they come, the more it's going to cost. So this next bullet, number 4, fourth bullet, certification costs are allowable as an overhead expense. So this has been a recurring question that's come up over and over again, is the company saying, okay, I've incurred this $1,000 cost or this $51,000 cost to get this certificate that's good for 3 years. How do I get compensated for that? Well, DoD, Department of Defense, has said you can't put it in a proposal as a line item. as a direct expense. You will get compensated, but you got to put it in your overhead expense. Some companies call it home office overhead. Other companies call it general and administrative costs. That's where it goes. So as you win contracts, that's how you're getting reimbursed for that cost for going through a CMMC certification process. Subcontractors will have the same CMMC level as the prime contractor or lower based on the statement of work. So an example of that is a solicitation is issued and the contracting office puts in the solicitation that this is a CMMC level 3 requirement. The technical people with the federal agency have to go through their statement of work paragraph by paragraph. And this is a learning process for them too. This is new for the federal agencies also, is that they're going to have to identify by page or by paragraph, whatever. This is level 3. This is level 1. This is level 3, level 3, level 1, 1, 1. And then when the solicitation gets issued and the prime or the potential prime contractors review the statement of work and determine, well, we can do 90% of this, but this 10% we don't do. So for example, they are a construction company that builds buildings. They don't do janitorial work, but the statement of work requires build it and perform janitorial services for 1 year after it's built. Well, so that construction company is probably going to subcontract out the janitorial services. And when you go through the statement of work, building the building was level 3, but the janitorial services were level 1. So they're going to issue solicitation for subcontract for janitorial services. And that contractor is then going to put in there that it is CMMC level 1 requirement. So any companies that don't have a certification for level 1 can't compete for it, because as we said earlier, all companies, whether you're prime or subcontractor, any tier, have to have a certification in order to be awarded a contract. So then that leaves only those janitorial companies that have their CMMC certification level 1 can compete for that subcontract. So that's what I was talking about there. So the subcontracts could be the same contract level as the prime contractor received at level 3, or they could be less than that, depending on what the requirement is within the statement of work. Next bullet, the prime contractors are responsible for all subcontractor tiers. Increased non-compliance penalties and risk, including, so this is talking about if you're not in compliance, loss of your current and future contracts, personal and corporate liability, and negative company branding. So in red, I put here 2 of the exemptions. One, if your company only sells COTS, which is commercial off-the-shelf items, supply items, an example of what is not COTS is you're a supply company, you buy products from the manufacturer and you sell them to the federal agency. But if the federal agency's statement of work requires a manufacturer's product to be altered or added to or subtracted from, that is not COTS. You are modifying a manufacturer's product. That is not COTS. COTS is if you buy a laptop from IBM and you resell it to a federal agency, that's COTS. That's commercial off the shelf. The other exemption is micro purchases. So if what you are selling to the government is less than $10,000, all your purchases are small, they're under $10,000, that is under the micro purchase threshold, you're exempt. You don't need to get an audit, pay for an audit, and get a certification for any CMMC level because you are exempt. You're a small seller, you're under $10,000 for each sale, that's an exemption. And if you only sell COTS, that's an exemption. COTS, regardless of the dollar value, could be $1 million worth of manufacturers' products that you're just buying from IBM and you're selling it to any number of federal agencies, that's COTS. So you're exempt. You don't need to pay money to go get an audit and get a certificate. Don't need it. Requirements of CMMC. So CMMC requirements were created from over 10 information protection and industry cybersecurity standards. The model addresses everything in your systems and information. There's 17 domains with 43 capabilities. There are 5 processes, as I mentioned, levels 1 through 5, maturity models. There's 171 practices across the 5 levels. The next bullet is includes 5 maturity levels. The basic cyber hygiene that I mentioned is CMMC level 1 to the highly advanced practices level 5. The Department of Defense has stated that levels 4 and 5 is probably going to be only a handful of companies throughout the entire United States, 4 or 5 companies. So really what we're talking about is levels 1, 2, and 3. What I highlighted here in orange is that this is one of the areas that's in the proposed changes for CMMC 2.0, changing from 5 levels to 3 levels. And the levels won't be 1, 3, and 5. They'll be 1, 2, and 3. So 4 and 5 drop off and 2 and 3 get renamed. Each maturity level includes all prior level domains and capabilities, practices, and processes. That's what I was talking about, that if you're going for a level 3 certification, you call, enter into a contract and have an auditor come out, and you have to meet all the controls for level 1 and all the controls for level 2 and all the controls for level 3 in order to be successful in your audit and get your certification for level 3, which is good for 3 years. So as I mentioned, each maturity level includes all the prior level domains. You have to adhere to all level practices and processes and prior levels required to achieve certification. So all those practices and processes that there are in the NIST SP 800-171 revision 2, the Department of Defense plans on adding some more. And overall, they're saying that the number will be growing to 479 in by 2025, which is when CMMC will start appearing in solicitations, 1 October 2025. So between now and then, they plan on adding another 479, or a total number of 479. Next page. Requirements of CMMC. Page is out of order. Okay, so the second column is the CMMC level maturity, which is 1 through 5 currently. So we look at going across level 1, there's 17 practices. Some examples there in the far right-hand column are grounds maintenance and janitorial. Level 2 is 55 practices. Examples are some IT services will be at level 2. Level 3, there's 58 practices, and level 3 is where CUI kicks in, controlled unclassified information. If the solicitation requires you to create CUI, then the requirement will be issued as CMMC level 3 requirement. Level 4 has 26 practices. additional practices. It's contractor examples, just higher data sensitivity, and level 5 has additional 15 practices, which is the highest data sensitivity. So each one of those practices at each level, so level 1 is 17, level 2 is 55, it's 55 added on to 17. Level 3, additional 58 added on to the 17 and 55. CMMC maturity levels. So this is an example where I've highlighted in red the word "and." So this is what coming forward from the previous slide. Level 1, all you're having to do in level 1 is say that you do it. So you look in the last column under nutshell. All you have to do when they get audited is say, yeah, I do it. Number 2, it requires some documentation. So you can see under the second column, it says you perform the practice and have written processes and policy. So in a nutshell is you do it and you document it. Level 3 is called managed. And so you can see there's 2 ands in there. So it's the first and second assessment objective, and establish, maintain, and resource the plan demonstrating the management of activities and practices, so on and so forth. So under the nutshell is it's the first 2. You do it, you document it, and for level 3, you demonstrate resources for it. So this is what we're talking about in this slide. Next slide. Oh, I've lost my keyboard again. All right, so I'm going to pause and zoom. And run 19. I got it back. Okay. CMMC by the numbers. So the first column is who and what, and then across the top from left to right are the levels 1 through 5. So as I said before, level 1 is basic computer hygiene. Level 2 is intermediate. It's kind of a gray area. Department of Defense hasn't actually said what types of companies or requirements are going to be at level 2. Level 3 is good hygiene. Level 4 is proactive, and level 5 is advanced progressive. So going back to level 1, you'll see what you need to do is 17 practices. Level 2 is 72 practices. Level 3 is 130 practices, which includes some of the NIST 800-171. Next page. So a recurring question that kept coming up over the past year and a half is, how do I know what is CUI? So what I've done here is provided you the source for understanding. You can read what CUI is. So it's DoDI is Department of Defense Instruction 5200.48, titled Controlled Unclassified Information. So CUI will be identified in this security classification guide, and the program office requiring activity must identify DoD CUI. So initially, companies were thinking that when they received a solicitation that they had to read through it and figure out if it had any CUI requirements in it. You don't need to do that. The agency who issues the solicitation has to be the entity that identifies whether there is or is not CUI. So for example, it's the Department of Defense, the US Navy is issuing a solicitation. They will identify in the solicitation if there is CUI. And if there is, they're going to say that it requires a CMMC level 3 certification, because level 3 is the start of CUI. Any requirements that have CUI are going to be at level 3. I've also provided the website for you there if you really want to learn more about CUI. Put you to sleep at night. This slide gives you some examples of CUI. So I got two columns there. So the left one, we'll look down there, second one, research and engineering data. That's going to be classified as CUI. Engineering drawings, specifications, creating manuals. If your solicitation requires you to create a manual, that's probably going to be classified as CUI. We don't want the manuals, the information getting out to our adversaries. Technical reports, technical orders. You get down to the bottom there on the right side, computer software executable code. And the next one, source code. That's IT stuff. So that's going to most likely be identified as CUI. So you got architect engineering requirements, you got IT requirements. So typically those are going to be classified as CUI. Next page. But here I've given you a pictorial of the hierarchy. And so you can see where you're at and who you're going to talk to. So at the very top is the Department of Defense. They're the driving agency for instituting CMMC. The next one is the accreditation body. The accreditation body is a nonprofit independent organization. They are not a federal agency. They have set this entity up to be the certifying and accrediting board for the entire CMMC process. So CMMC is not only a DoD initiative. There are 2 or 3 other federal agencies that are watching DoD's rollout of CMMC. And if DoD is successful, they are going to launch CMMC requirements in their solicitations. But GSA is one of them. But GSA has already determined that this is really important, and they are not waiting on DoD. GSA has already started putting CMMC requirements in some of their solicitations. So if you are a GSA contractor, you probably got an amendment for your contract, a modification to your contract to include CMMC. Also, if you're entertaining being an awardee of a GSA contract, look through that solicitation and see if it's got CMMC clauses in it. So from the accreditation board, we go down to C3PAO. These are the certified third-party assessor organizations. They are commercial companies. They're the ones that you enter into a contract with, pay them to come out to audit your cybersecurity system. If you're successful, you'll get a certificate that's issued by them that's good for 3 years, provided you have no infractions. If you have an infraction, your certificate is withdrawn and you start over. Next is the CA. That's the certified assessor. The C3PAOs may have their own certified assessors, or they may subcontract out to individuals or other companies that will provide certified assessors. The last on there is OSC. That's you, the organization seeking certification. You are the OSC. You can see the arrow goes back up to the C3PAO. So that's who you're going to enter into a contract with once you determine that you believe you've got your house in order to pass an audit and get your certification. The journey, 7 steps in the journey. So it takes your company's leadership to learn and understand the CMMC model. Number 2, determine the CMMC level that you want to go after, what the boundaries are. Number 3 is identify what are your gaps. So if you want to be at, say, just level 1, good computer cybersecurity hygiene, you go into the controls, 110 controls, and you determine which ones you're not in compliance with. That's identifying the gaps. Number 4 is remediate the gaps. So you develop and implement and mitigate those gaps. Number 5 is your audit preparation. Prepare a team and organize the CMMC documentation, evidence, and secure the artifacts for an audit. So the takeaway on that is, if you want to minimize your costs of an audit, you need to prepare for the auditor to come. If you don't do that, then when the auditor arrives, they're going to start asking for, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And then you're going to go spend time finding it and bringing it into the auditor. So what you want to do to save cost and time is to have those documents in your conference room table for that auditor when they come. There they all are. You're not wasting time. The auditor's not sitting there twiddling his thumbs or her thumbs, waiting for you to bring the documents. You've got them there. So the amount of time on site is reduced, and that should reduce your cost for the audit. Number 6, audit execution. So this is when the C3PAO comes on site. It's real time to achieve your certification. In red there, I said that certification is good for 3 years, unless you have an infraction. I've also provided the website there for you to find the current approved C3PAOs. It's at cmmcab.org. Once you're on that site, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll click on Marketplace. And halfway down the left-hand side, there'll be a pull-down menu. And you'll select C3PAO, and up will pop currently the 3 approved C3PAO companies, and you can contact each one of them, negotiate the cost. You can also see where they're coming from. Are they providing the assessors, or are they subcontracting them out? Because then you'll want to know if the C3PAO is providing the assessors, then you're probably going to want to know how far away are they from you. So if you're here in Bremerton, Washington, and there's 3 CPAOs, one's in Dallas, Texas, one's in San Diego, California, and one's in Norfolk, Virginia, and they're going to provide the assessors, well, you're going to probably want to pick the closest one in San Diego, California, because like I said, they're probably going to charge you travel time and on-site time by the hour. So the closer they are, the less it's going to cost. But it's all negotiable, and ask for a quote. Get quotes from them. What are you going to charge me? Because their hourly rates could be different. And of course, travel costs could be different from the East Coast to here, from San Diego to here. Lastly, post the audit performance. Post. After the audit is done and you got your certification, you got to do ongoing compliance on the program practices and processes to make sure that you're in adherence consistently day in and day out. So it's not over once you get the audit and you get your certificate. It's ongoing. You got to keep monitoring your system. Just for example, level 1, good cybersecurity hygiene. You got your firewall, you've got your malware, and so on and so forth. So every time there's an update to the malware, you want to update your system with the current revision of that software. That's keeping up with cybersecurity. The benefits: this reduces cyber risk, prevents unauthorized disclosure, protects your intellectual property on your computer, and also protects your system. It protects the federal agency from your system getting hacked by outsiders, foreign states, and stealing that information that you're producing for the federal agency. Requires compliance program, provides a framework that enforces a systematic compliance program. You are able then to compete with large businesses, because everybody's going to be required to have a certification. Large business doesn't get a certification, they're not going to be able to submit a proposal and get the award of a contract. So if you get that certification, you're going to be able to compete with anybody. Those that don't have certification aren't going to get awarded contracts. And lastly, it builds a trust relationship between you and the Department of Defense. By demonstrating cybersecurity and organizational effectiveness, trust is created, non-compliance penalties are avoided, and agencies see you as a low-risk contractor because you've gone through the cybersecurity audit and have a certification. You are then thus considered lower risk. All right, so what I've done on these next 2 slides, I believe. Yeah, next 2 slides, I've identified the controls, and in the right-hand column, in layman's terms, what that means. So just pulling out a couple of these here is the first one: identify, report, and correct information and information system flaws in a timely manner. So you're patching your IT stuff. Let's look at another one here. So go to the 4th one down: perform periodic scans of the information system and real-time scans of files from external sources as files are downloaded, opened, or executed. That's also known as use the antivirus software. This is level 1. This is basic computer hygiene. You have antivirus software, you have malware software, you control your passwords. It's all basic stuff. But I've identified here on these 2 pages the controls for CMMC level 1. Notice at the top there, I've identified the FAR clause. These are the 17 practices for level 1, which is found in the FAR clause 52.204-21. That's where I mentioned it had 15 subparagraphs that identifies the 17 practices. And remember that you are exempt if you only sell items, commercial off-the-shelf items, COTS, which is covered in Federal Acquisition Regulation Part 12. So if that's all you're doing, if you're just you want to call yourself a reseller, you don't need to get certified. You don't need to go through these controls for level 1. And the second page is still more of the level 110 controls. And the next 3 or 4 pages is level 3. So what I'm doing here is identifying these controls. You've got a hard copy of this. You can take it and reference it in the future. So these go on and on and on and on. So remember, level 3 costs about $51,000 to get certified, get that certification. There are these additional controls. So in addition to the previous 2 pages of level 1 controls, now you have these additional level 3 controls. You have to have all of them in order to get certified. So what their basic theme here, CMMC level 3, is coming from NIST SP 800-171 revision 2. When I say revision 2, that's the latest revision. The basic instruction came out, and then there was revision 1, revision 2. Well, both of those revisions only cleaned up some ambiguities in the language. The actual controls have not changed from the basic document through level 2. Controls are the same. The meat of it has not changed. So we have, what, 4 pages? Okay, now we go on to the CMMC assessment process. So you are the OSC, the organization seeking certification. You submit a request for assessment to the C3PAO to obtain your assessment. So to find a C3PAO, as I mentioned before, you go to that website, cmmcab.org, go to Marketplace, and under Listings, select C3PAO. and you'll find the current approved, certified, qualified C3 PAO organizations that you'll enter into a contract with, and they will conduct the audit. It can be one or more assessors that will be assigned to your company. It all depends on the size of your company and how many locations that you have. So for example, if your headquarters is in Seattle, Washington, but you have some satellite offices, one in San Diego and one's in Boise, Idaho, that could require more assessors to converge on to all three of those locations, or one assessor comes and takes more time to go to all three of those locations, as opposed to a company, small company, you just have operating out of your home, or you've got a lease space for your company, and that's all you have. So the CA, the assessor, is going to come to that one location. And if you're at level 1, it's going to be a short visit, 1 day probably, as opposed to 3 days because you got the home office and 2 satellite offices. So it all depends on your company and where you're located. Number 3, the CA will conduct the assessment on behalf of the C3 PAO. Number 4, the C3 PAO will report the results to the accreditation board, who reviews it for accuracy and completeness. And then it goes back to number 5, the C3 PAO. Once the board approves it, the C3 PAO is the organization that issues the certification to you. That's good for 3 years. And lastly, the accreditation board is the entity that will handle adjudication actions where you, the OSC, disagrees with the findings of the auditor. So for example, you're going for a level 1, the auditor comes in, you got 110 controls to meet, and the auditor says, you're not in full compliance with 2 of the 110. You have a briefing from them, you have a discussion, you disagree with them. You think you're in compliance with both of those, that you should pass your audit and get your certification.
Here's a note for you, Terry.
So that process then is adjudication. You'll send your grievance to the accreditation board. They will investigate. And as I said here in the 2 sub-bullets, the adjudication is not a timely process. It may not be timely, but they will give you an interim pass until the adjudication is done. So for example, if you're going for level 1, as I mentioned, that scenario, there's 110 controls. There were 2 of them that the auditor found and that you disagreed with, you thought you did pass it up to the accreditation board to adjudicate it. And some months later, they determined that, yes, you're correct. So that interim pass that they gave you, they will give you a certificate in the interim until the adjudication is done. After the adjudication is done and determined that you are correct, the auditor was incorrect, then the interim is pulled and you get your actual certification. Is good for 3 years. If they rule in favor of the assessor, then the interim pass certification is pulled, and then you start the process over again, or to get re-audited for the 2 that you were missing if you do it within 90 days, or if it's more than 90 days, then you got to start the process over again, pay for another full-blown audit. Next page. Okay, known issues with no answers. There are no documents of evidence required for CMMC level 1 certification. So technically, you, the OSC, the company, can just say they do it and no documentation is required until you get to CMMC level 2. Level 2 requires documentation. Level 1 does not. The level 1 is based on the Federal Acquisition Regulation 15 cybersecurity requirements, which have documentation requirements. So CMMC guidance is in conflict with the federal requirements. The next issue is the accreditation board has yet to release the assessment guidance. The NIST SP 800-171 71A is the expected basis for the 110 CUI controls that make up CMMC. The other 20 practices have yet to be determined. The assessment guidance should be what the OSCs use to conduct your internal assessments and prepare for the formal CMMC assessment. So if you're dealing with CUI, that's what the NIST instruction is all about. CUI is level 3. So if you want to shoot for a level 3 assessment, go into the NIST SP 800-171 and follow those controls. Once you think you're in compliance with all those, then you can go to a C3PO, enter into a contract, request an audit, and get audited, pass the audit, get your certificate that's good for 3 years. All right, so I'm going to spend one slide and talk about the DoD Cybersecurity interim rule. This went into effect last December 1st. It applies only to government requirements with CUI, controlled unclassified information. Does not apply to COTS, does not apply to micro purchases. So the 2 clauses are identified there, both Department of Defense clauses, that's why they're DFARS, 204-7019 and 70-20. There's the titles are there, and they were created and went into effect on November of 2020. So when you look through your solicitation, look for those 2 clauses. If they're there, then there's a requirement for you to do a self-assessment and post it up on the internet. The next bullet, prime and subcontractors must have cybersecurity assessments performed and recorded prior to a contract being awarded to you. So if you are the prime contractor, you get awarded the contract and you're going to subcontract out some portion of the work, that subcontractor has to have performed a self-assessment and posted it up to the internet in SPURS in order for you to award a contract to them. So you got to work with your subcontractor network also to help them get their self-assessments and get posted so you can award subcontracts to them. As I mentioned earlier, the prime contractor is responsible for the subcontractors. They're not on their own. Assessments may be basic, medium, or high. If you're doing a self-assessment, you are at the basic. And the majority of the contractors are going to be doing a basic assessment, meaning you're going to do the self-assessment yourself and post your score up on SPURS. Medium or high assessments will be performed by the Defense Contract Management Agency and recorded by DCMMA up on the website. And as I mentioned, mentioned before, and in parentheses there's very few companies that are going to be at medium or high. The vast majority of the companies are going to be at the basic, performing the self-assessment themselves and posting their score up on the internet in SPURS. Next bullet, post the assessment online in SPURS. You do that through PIEE. You need to have an account in PIEE. So the long pole in all of this is getting that account established in PIEE. That can be anywhere from 4 hours to 48 hours. After that, it's easy. So once you get access to PIEE, then you'll click on SPRS, SPURS, and answer 6 questions. One of them is, what's your score? Another question will be, when did you do your self-assessment? The last question will be, if you had less than 110, when do you plan on achieving all 110 controls? You put a date in there. You can change that at any time. And a few other questions like, what's your POAM? It's a security document also. Scores can range from a -200 to a +110. So there is an assessment tool that you go through and answer the questions. It's on an Excel spreadsheet. You start out at the maximum 110. And as you read through each one of them, every one you answer no, your score starts dropping down. You can actually get a negative score. If you answer no to all of them, you'll get a -200. At this time, the Department of Defense doesn't care what your score is. If it's a negative 150 or if it's a positive 30. All they want to see is that you did the self-assessment and you recorded your score up on the internet in SPURS in order to receive a contract award by the Department of Defense. Because when they receive your quote or your proposal, they do their evaluation. And if you're the successful offerer, before they can award it to you, they have to go to that internet website in SPURS, look up your company and see that you've done a self-assessment. If your company is not on that website, you will not receive the award. And as a prime contractor, you have to do the same thing for your subcontractors. Next bullet, assessments in SPURS are the same as CMMC certifications. They're good for 3 years. I mentioned the solicit. Oh, so there's a possibility, it hasn't happened yet, that the Department of Defense can issue a solicitation and state in the solicitation that you need a minimum score of X in order to qualify to get awarded a contract. Haven't seen any solicitations with that in there yet, but that's a possibility. So for example, a contracting officer from the Department of Army says that you need to have a minimum score of 30 in order to be awarded the contract. So when they receive your quotes or proposal, they evaluate it and you're the successful offerer, they're going to go into the internet and SPURS and look up your company and look for your score. If the solicitation said you need a score of at least 30 there and you got a score of 45, you can be awarded the contract. If your SPURS score is 20, you won't be awarded the contract. There's that possibility that there may be a minimum score requirement in solicitations. Haven't seen it yet, haven't heard of it yet. But just want to put that out there that that's a possibility that could happen. Because the nature of the solicitation is kind of sensitive and they want to lower the risk meter on a company, that they're in compliance with the majority of the 110 controls, and that's who they want to award it to. So that's a possibility that they could put a minimum score requirement in the solicitation and follow on contract. So last bullet there, the government may find your proposal non-responsive because of your score, and the assessments are subject to the False Claims Act, meaning that if you go up to the internet, PIEE and into SPURS and record a score which is false, you can be prosecuted under the False Claims Act. And don't think that doesn't happen, because it already has. A company was found guilty under the False Claims Act for falsifying their score in SPURS. So, there's no harm for you to have less than 110. As I said earlier, it can be minus 200 all the way to 110. All the contracting officer wants to do is to go into that website, see that you have identified that you've done a self-assessment and you have posted your score. So don't lie about it. If it's a minus 10, put in a minus 10. It's better that than falsifying it and being subject to the False Claims Act, going to jail. All right, I have put in one place here all the cybersecurity clauses. There are 5 of them. So the first one we've been talking about is the FAR clause. That can be from any federal agency if the federal agency puts in their solicitation in the follow-on contract. The next one is the DFARS clause. This is safeguarding covered defense information. That was last updated in December of 2019. The next 2 I have in orange there, or some shade of orange, are the DoD interim rule clauses. So that requires you to do your self-assessment, post your score up in PIEE, SPURS, track it, put in a goal in the future of when you're going to be in full compliance with all 110 controls. The last one is the DFARS clause, -7021 is the CMMC requirement. That's the one that after the 5-year rollout, you'll start seeing it in all solicitations starting 1 October of 2025. That's the clause that you will see. We're at question time. All right. I'm sure there's going to be questions, especially considering the latest release proposed changes in CMMC being called 2.0. So let's see, how do we want to handle questions? In chat?
They can do chat, they can just raise their hand, or they
Yep.
could just unmute because it's a
Yep.
small group.
Good. We're not limited on time, people, so let's ask your questions.
So Gordon had noted that some auditors will do a pre-assessment. And then he asked if there were tools to determine what level they need to be.
All right, so that's a multi-part question there. I'll start from the back and work backwards. To determine what level CMMC certification you need. So as we talked in the presentation, there's level 1. And basically forget about level 2. So it's 1 and 3. If you're going to create or you currently deal with CUI, which is classified, controlled, unclassified information, you got to be at level 3, no exceptions. 70 to 80% of DoD contractors, whether it be prime or subcontractors, DoD has said they're going to be at level 1 because they're not dealing with CUI. So those are your two choices. If you're dealing with CUI, you're level 3. If you're not dealing with CUI, you're level 1. So that's the answer to one question. What are the other two? You want to repeat those?
The other one was, he just said that
It was more of just a statement of the fact when you're
Yeah.
talking about having people, an assessor come in and you want to make sure you're ready for them. I just made a comment to everybody that a lot of the assessors offer kind of a pre-assessment where they don't come on site yet, but they'll kind of walk you through everything ahead of time.
Okay, so remember my comment on that earlier is a company cannot help you, the company that wants to get assessed and get a certification, and also do the audit.
Correct.
So there are, I have it in my next slide. Let's go to the next slide. In my summary, I have second bullet. There are RPs and RPOs. Those are the companies, if you don't have the wherewithal within your company, like an IT department or an IT person who can go through the 110 controls and determine whether you're ready or where your gaps are and fulfill those gaps, but you need to hire somebody from outside, this is the place where you go to do that. You go to that CMMCAB.org website, click on in the upper right-hand corner, Marketplace. Over in the middle on the left-hand side, you scroll down the list and hit RPs or RPOs. So we go back to our list of acronyms and abbreviations. And RP is, I don't want to misspeak, it's a registered provider. Of course, I don't have it on there. Registered.
It's a registered provider.
A registered practitioner. They're individuals who you can hire that can come in and help you get ready for an audit. RPOs are registered practitioner organizations. They are companies. So RPs is an individual, RPOs are companies or organizations. So if you need help, go to the accreditation body's website and on the list, pull down, pick RPs and RPOs, and those are the companies that have been vetted to help companies like yourself to get ready for an audit. Is there another part of that 3-part question there?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question. Oh, so while we're talking about getting help and C3 3PAOs. There are already individuals and companies out there scamming people. They're saying, oh, we can come in and do an audit for you. And it's going to cost you X amount of money. Don't do it. There's only one place to find auditors, and that is at CMMCAB.org, marketplace. Go to the list, select C3PAOs, and as of 2 months ago, there are only 3 that have been vetted. There's a big process that those C3PAOs have to go through in order to be an entity that can do an audit for you. They have to take a class by the accreditation board. They have to get level 3 certified themselves. They have to go through, there's another accreditation body that they have to go through, and they got to pay. So only those companies are the authorized ones that can actually do the audit. So that's where you want to go, cmmcab.org, to find the currently 3 C3PAOs that can do an audit for you. Same thing if you want to find outside help to help you through those 110 controls for level 1 to get ready for an organization, for an audit, is go to the accreditation board website, marketplace, listing, and select RPs or RPOs. Those are the ones that have been vetted, that are available for you to hire to help you get your certification. They will not be the auditors. Remember, I said earlier, an individual company can do both, provided they have separation of functions, like 2 divisions within the company or whatnot. So the organization that helps you get ready cannot be the same group that comes out and audit you. That's like putting the fox in the hen house. Next question.
Terry, this is from Diane. Says it's all new and an extensive amount of information, which is what happens regularly in government contracting, not just for CMMC. Her question's broad. She's currently in the application and certification process for woman-owned small business. Are there areas that she needs to really focus on or comply with? And her consulting services are in management consulting.
Well, the CMMC applies to every industry. If you want to get a contract with the Department of Defense and in the future, any federal agency, you'll need your certification if you don't meet any of the exemptions. So we talked about 2 exemptions: COTS, which is reselling, which is not what you do, and micro purchase threshold, which is sales under $10,000 each. If your contracts are going to be under $10,000 each for each time, that's micro purchase. So you're exempt. You don't need to go through an audit and get a certification. If you think you're going to be wanting to pursue getting federal contracts with the type of work you do, consulting, then you'll want to get a level 1 certification, $1,000. It's good for 3 years, and market your wares to all the federal agencies. Right now, it's only DoD, but in some cases GSA, and more federal agencies are going to follow suit. And in time, all federal agencies will be having CMMC requirements. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Did I?
Diane? Oh, she said yes.
Okay, good.
Apparently, we're
Yes,
all very
thank you.
shy today.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot I was on mute. Can I ask one other question in relation to that? My focus is really initially on state entities. And again, this is all new for me. So I think you answered that question, because in some cases, GSA will be requiring it. And in the future, it sounds like it's going to be pretty much standard fare in terms of qualifications.
All federal agencies.
Okay.
Yeah. So for all the attendees here today, CMMC is such a big issue in loss of intellectual property, state secrets, the hacking that's going on, the espionage. The states are aware of what the feds are doing. And if the feds are successful in rolling out the CMMC, we are already hearing some states are going to be following suit. So this is not going to be isolated just to the federal government. It's probably going to be, in the long term, all government agencies, whether it's fed, state, counties, cities, it's coming on board. So we're all going to have to do better in cybersecurity. So as I said at the beginning, there are only two types of companies: those who have been hacked and those who are currently being hacked and don't know it. You're going to get hacked, or you're already been hacked. So this is what we're trying to do, is mitigate this so we don't lose our proprietary information or secrets if we're dealing with the federal government, or in the future, the state or the counties, losing that proprietary information, intellectual property and whatnot. We've just got to do better in controlling that data. And that's what this is all about. CMMC is all about putting better controls in place on our computers in our workspace. Did I answer your question?
Diane?
Yes.
You said you wanted to focus on state. So the WOSB is a federal certification. If you want to be recognized as woman-owned, for instance, in Washington State, that is a separate application and certification. They don't recognize one another's.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm working with a PTAC person, Jody Connard. I believe she's in Tri-Cities.
Yes.
Yep.
So you're familiar with Jody, Terry?
Yeah.
Okay. And Kathy. So again, it's just an overwhelming amount of information, and I don't want to take up too much time here. But I think what I need to do is get back with Jody, because as I say, I'm in that process of gathering documents to submit, and I'm thinking this is an awful lot of information to present for the certification. So I will get back with her to just clarify what I need to be doing and that I'm in the right slot for Washington State.
Yeah, because Washington State's going to go through the Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises, and a lot of the documentation is similar, but you do need to make sure that you're going after the first certification that will be most advantageous to you. So definitely follow up with Jody.
Okay, so that's the OMWBE that certifies for Washington State.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And again, the very thorough information.
Yeah, Diane, you're doing the right thing. You're in touch with a PTAC office already and working with a counselor. So that's probably one of the best things that any and all of you can do is communicate with a PTAC office and have them help you through the quagmire and bureaucracy of all the different governments, because there's more than one government out there. There's the capital G federal government, then there's state, county, city,
right,
boards and whatnot, and they all do it different.
Yes, that's the interesting and fun fact, isn't it?
Yes, and as Kathy said, the federal government agencies do not recognize the certifications from the state.
Yeah.
The state of Washington does not recognize the federal agency certifications. So whether it's woman-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, I mean, states don't even have hub zones. So the federal government's got the hub zones. And there's the SB 8A program. Well, the states don't recognize that. That's the federal government program, 8A program for socially, economically disadvantaged people. It's a 9-year 8A program. It's a great program to get into.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, both of you. I appreciate the information. I'm going to mute myself so others can ask questions.
So while we're waiting for the next question, if anybody is wanting a tool to do a self-assessment of the 110 controls, whether it's for the DoD interim rule or in preparation for CMMC level one, I have an Excel spreadsheet tool that I can provide to you. Just submit your request to Kathy Kokos, and I will provide you that Excel spreadsheet that starts out at 110 controls. You go through and answer the questions, and at the end, that's your control number, and you can go into SPURS then and post your score. And that it's the same controls, whether it's the interim rule or the CMC level one, it's all the same 10 controls that come out of the NIST SP 800-171. So it's not a waste of time if you think you're going to be needing level one or level three in the future, or you want to currently get a DoD contract or subcontract. You have to be in compliance with the DoD interim rule that went into effect last December 1st. These controls, this spreadsheet can help you. So if you want it, just ask Kathy and I'll send it to you. Next question.
Hey,
Really?
Terry, this is Leslie. I just have some really elementary questions that I get from my clients. Like, for level one status, do you have a ballpark price as to how much that would cost to get through level one?
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
well, and then the other thing, the other question is, if I'm a consultant and I never do anything with DoD, but I do stuff with like the Forest Service, do I still have to go through all this?
If you're not going to be a recipient of a federal contract or currently a DoD contract, you don't need to go through the audit. If you're just consulting and selling your wares to another company that needs to get certified, then you don't need to be certified. Only if you're going to receive a contract by currently the Department of Defense, or in some cases the GSA, and in the future, all federal agencies. If you're actually going to be a recipient of a contract or a subcontractor, that's then is when you need to have a certification.
Okay, and so do you have the ballpark on the cost for?
Yeah, I was
Uh,
looking for the page in our presentation where we covered that earlier. For level one, DoD last year said it would be about $1,000. And for level two, about $51,000.
Okay, that
Well-
answers my questions.
Yeah, and DoD in their proposed changes to CMMC, which they are now calling 2.0, they're saying one of the things that they're going to do is do a analytical assessment of refining what that cost is for level one for a company to get a certification, and what the cost will be for level three. But as I mentioned, it can be 9 to 24 months before any of that gets accepted and implemented. So for right now, it's $1,000 for level one and $51,000 for level two is the best guess from the Department of Defense. Yeah, that's on page 16 of the PowerPoint presentation.
Thanks, Terry.
Welcome.
And just to validate your statement on, pursuing any of these certifications, all of the scammers are out there, and it doesn't matter if it's simple, I just want to get registered in the federal database, to getting CMMC certified. You really need to do your due diligence and maybe talk to local PTACs to determine who's a valid provider and who's not.
Yeah, having said that, for everyone that's still with us in this class, you bring up a good point about scammers. So the first step in the process of getting registered to compete for federal contracts is getting your Dun & Bradstreet number. As soon as you contact Dun & Bradstreet, they're going to try and sell you all kinds of other stuff. You don't need any of that. PTAC can provide all that to you for free. Your next step after you get your NAICS code is registering your company in SAM. As soon as you start registering in SAM, all kinds of companies are going to come out and say, hey, we can help you with that. Here's our fee. We'll get you registered in SAM. You don't need that. PTAC can help you for free. Same thing with CMMC registration. There are all kinds of companies out there already saying, we can help you get certified. We can do an audit for you. Because they have not been vetted by the accreditation board. There are only 3 currently as of 2 months ago that can actually come in and do an audit. Because if you spend a few $1,000s with this other entity that says that they're going to come in and do an audit for you and give you a certification, and you receive that, and you give that to a contracting federal agency, it's worthless. It's not even worth the ink that's on the paper. You have to go through the accreditation body's website and select one of their C3PAOs to have an audit performed. So beware of the scammers. And for the most part, these companies that are saying we can do this for a fee, most all of that can be done for free through a PTAC. So, contact your PTAC, very resourceful.
Thanks,
Any other
Terry.
questions? Any other questions? 9:48, we're just about at 2 hours. So let me go down through my summary here. I don't think I did that yet. So in summary, get started now. If you want to be a DoD contractor or subcontractor, conduct your self-assessment. So what I haven't mentioned previously is I put in there in the second bullet, you can go on the internet and pull down the NIST Handbook 162 and do your self-assessment, go through that yourself. And you may determine, well, some of these are too hard. I don't have any resources within my company. So then you can go to hire a company to assist you. That is the RPOs and the RPs, and they're at that same website, cmmcab.org. And there's currently over 2,600 of those that are available throughout the country. Expect to wait for a C3PO to provide an audit because they're in short supply. As I mentioned, there's only 3 of them as of 2 months ago. I think there's about 400 of them currently being vetted that are pending to get approved. Once they're approved, they'll go on the list. 2 bullets below that, you must be certified at time of contract award. So this has been a question that's come up in the past. Do I need a certificate when I receive a solicitation? Do I need a certification in order to submit a proposal? And the answer is no, no. You need to have your certification at time of contract award. So no requirement when a solicitation is issued and you decide to compete for it and you submit your quote or you submit your proposal, there's no requirement that you have to submit your certification with that package. The contracting officer will require the certification certificate at time of award. And if you don't have it at time of award, you don't get the contract. Next bullet, get secured and stay secured. As I mentioned earlier, that once you get your certification, the process isn't done for 3 years. You got to go through and you got to keep up with your cybersecurity, and you may have some follow-on assessments done, follow-on audits, depending on the type of your company. And I mentioned before, there's 2 or 3 other federal agencies that are watching the DoD rollout. GSA has already said since then, since this statement, that they're putting it in some of their solicitations currently. That's how important this is. So the last bullet there, add your certification level to your capability statement. That's really important. So your capability statement is 1 sheet, double-sided paper that you're using as your marketing tool. And on there, if you get certified at level 1 or level 3, put that on there for the agencies to see and the prime contractors to see. That's going to be a really big deal. So lastly, in red at the bottom, read your solicitation to see what cybersecurity cybersecurity clauses are in that solicitation, which will be in your follow-on contract. Yes, and the one slide that I provided earlier identifies all 5 potential cybersecurity clauses. One's been in existence for years for all federal agencies. Then the DoD has one. There's 2 for the DoD interim rule that are in effect now. And lastly is the CMC clause that will be in all solicitations and contracts come 1 October 2025. And last but not least, see your local PTAC for assistance. And for the Washington Olympic Peninsula, it's Kathy Kokes. There's her phone number and email address. And you can also find your local Washington PTAC office by going into the website washingtonptac.org and find them anywhere in the state of Washington, for which there are 8 different regions. Last chance for questions. Okay, we'll call it a day. Thank you for joining. Hope you all got something out of this.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Terry.
Bye.